Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the About a Book virtual lunch and learn. My name is Nick Havranek. I am the Engagement Strategies Coordinator for University Libraries here at Ball State, and I am also serving as the Assistant to the Executive Secretary of the Friends of Bracken Library. And a little bit about the virtual lunch and learn series in general. It's held on the third Thursday of every month during the academic year, and it's just a brief online program, and we've kind of shifted gears to this event now being more of a workshop type thing, so you're going to learn something in these events. And these events are always free and open to the public, so if you happen to know someone who would be interested in one of the upcoming topics, feel free to share the registration link. And like I said, this is the About a Book event. And in this one, we are going to hear from Joseph Roberts, a research and teaching services librarian here at Ball State, about how to research the history of a literary text, such as like a novel, short story, play, poem, or other literary work. You'll learn about information resources useful for investigating the publication history of a text, discovering its initial public and critical reception, and finding analyses and interpretations of the text, including those that have been most impactful. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things off to Joseph Roberts.
Hello there. My name is Joseph Roberts, and is everyone able? I believe I've successfully unmuted myself and shared my slide. I'll invite anyone to tell me in the chat if I'm wrong in either of those 2 points. And also, if you have any questions as we move along, you could throw something into the chat for me too. Again, as I said, my name is Joseph Roberts, and I am a research and teaching services librarian here at Ball State University Libraries. And one of my roles is that I am the liaison librarian to students and faculty in the Department of English. As such, I kind of provide an additional point of contact between the department and the library, and people are free to reach out to me if they have questions about their research and would like some support. So my presentation today is a workshop I offer, and it is targeted toward graduate students in English, but it has been attended by users ranging from students at the Indiana Academy up through Ball State's faculty, and whoever happens to attend on any given day. This introduces them to some resources useful for researching some literary text that they have chosen, and it's organized. I organized the workshop around answering, there they are, 4 questions. What is the publication history of the book? Or in other words, what editions of it exist? When were they published? By what publishers, etc.? How was the text received in its time? Again, what did readers and reviewers think of it when it was new? Where can one find recent scholarly analyses and interpretations of the text? And what are the most impactful, or what analyses and interpretations have been particularly impactful of that text? So for each of these questions, I'm going to present a list of research resources where one might find some answers. Most of these are electronic resources because that seems to be what researchers find the most convenient these days. And of course, for each, I'm going to demonstrate a couple of the resources. Students often come to the library with a very compelling reason for finding this kind of information. To wit, they've been told to do so as part of an upcoming assignment. Absent concerns about a grade, though, there are some interesting, these are interesting questions to answer, and they illuminate something about the book the person has chosen. In researching the publication history, we kind of find out something about the book's reach. Was it a book that arrived and then went out of print and faded into relative obscurity, or has it been called to readers' attention again and again through the generations with new editions? Has it been limited to its own original language, or has it kind of spread around the world through translations? In looking into the reception of a book, we uncover reviews that were published when it was new, and it gives us a sense of what critics and readers thought about it when they first encountered that text, without years or decades of hindsight, or in some cases, without this halo that a book can take on of having later been deemed a classic. There were authors, of course, who were little praised during their lives and careers, but who became part of a literary canon at some time after their deaths. And mixed in with the reviews, we often encounter news content about a book, which might recount how a book was potentially banned or suppressed upon its initial publication. And as we read, we might certainly do our own interpreting and analyzing of a book's subtext, but in searching for these analyses and interpretations, we find out what other readers, and particularly what scholars, saw within the text. You could potentially deepen your own understanding of your own reading, or encounter some new reading of the text. And with the impactful analyses, as librarians, we often, there's something we understand and often point out to students, that scholarship is a conversation. And then even at the point of being students, Ball State students are building their own voice and entering this conversation. So it's helpful to them to know what analyses of a text have been particularly important to establishing a shared or a general understanding of the text. And for those of us who are not literature scholars, it's just another interesting way to enrich our understanding of a book. So let's move into some places where we might find answers to this first question: what is the publication history of a text? One strategy is to look at large library catalogs. So we'll take a look at WorldCat, which is the world's largest library catalog. Another strategy would be to use a database called Books in Print. These are both available on the University Library's A to Z databases list. So I'm going to move away from my slide, and we should all be able to see the library's homepage here. So to get at these electronic resources, and again, you can always reach our homepage by Googling Ball State Library. The URL, as you can see up there, is bsu.edu/academics/libraries. But you can also type in bsu.edu/library and be redirected here. But from our homepage, I will scroll down to where I find this outdoor photo of Bracken Library with some links or tiles in front of it, and I'm going to click Databases. And this list is browsable in various ways. If you were not sure which database to choose, you could go up here to the Subjects menu and maybe say, well, I have an English question, or a history or humanities question, as the case may be. But when you're looking for a particular database, such as in this case, we're going to look at the Union Catalog WorldCat, you can always click on the alphabet up here on the first letter in its name. So I'll go to the W's and choose WorldCat. So here is our search page for WorldCat. WorldCat is a Union catalog. It combines the catalogs of more than, I have heard, 70,000 libraries and other institutions, largely in North America. The folks who put WorldCat together can sometimes be a bit cagey about saying how many libraries are included. But it contains records for more than 2.7 billion items. So the basics of searching for information about a particular book, play, poem, short story, etc., is to go into these resources, be they catalogs or databases, and do some searching using the title of the book and the author's name. So we're going to enter our search terms in these separate boxes here in WorldCat. You can see I've been doing some searching earlier. And next to each box, there is a pull-down menu with many options such as keyword, material type, publisher, you'll see here. These give us the chance to tell WorldCat where we want it to look for our search terms. So I'm going to find author here, and we could just go with author and title. It's a little bit broader way of searching, but I often go with maybe a little bit stricter option of author phrase and title phrase too. So I am going to look for some information or some additions about the first in a series of children's books that I was in thrall of as a kid. It's called The Book of Three by Lloyd Alexander. And I can additionally, under limit type 2, I'm going to check the box for books as I want to find some books. I'll then run my search. And WorldCat is based on bibliographic records, those surrogates or records describing books held by its participating libraries. And you'll see here that WorldCat has found, it's easy to miss, 175 records. I would not presume from that that there are 175 unique combinations of an edition and a format of the Book of Three and WorldCat. There can be duplicates on the list. They seem to arise from situations where items maybe have been cataloged differently. So a student would need to look through these, taking note of publishers and publication dates to see how many are unique. And as they go, I'll show you in a little bit, they could possibly mark these and export them to citation management applications and things that would support them in doing that. But within the results, we'll start out with that. You can see, for instance, the publication line telling you the name of a publisher of an item in WorldCat and the year of its publication. And you can also see this green banner here, Ball State University Libraries. That's telling us that this particular item is held by the libraries here at Ball State. You can click a title to see the record for the item, get more information about it. Some other interesting things that we can see here beyond the information about the book or this edition of it down here. We can find out how many libraries in WorldCat hold the item, and we can initiate an interlibrary loan request too. The libraries worldwide that own the item, this can be kind of interesting. It can give you a sense of, if we request the item, how quickly might we have a copy delivered for us to use. So we can see that this copy or this edition of the Book of Three is held by a number of libraries here in Indiana. That would be an indication that we might be able to get it relatively quickly, rather than something that is not held in Indiana or is held by only a few libraries. And if we wanted to request it, we can go to that interlibrary loan link there, where it would connect us to our interlibrary loan account, also known at Ball State as Iliad, and we could complete this form to place a request for the book. So the default ranking of our results in WorldCat, incidentally, is by the number of libraries holding an item. Again, that's useful if you want to find one that's fairly common and get something quickly. But there are, back on the search page, other sorting options. We could, for instance, choose date, and that would bring the most recent items up to the top. And as I said, a person going along and finding things of interest could check these boxes to mark a few books. And then up here we have these large tabs at the top, and just below them a set of 4 smaller tabs. We could go, after checking some boxes, to marked records. And here we would be able to email this list to ourselves, maybe export it to EndNote or some other citation management application, or print the list. When I had the idea for this workshop, I was helping some graduate students find information about texts that were book length or monograph length, if you like. And I began to wonder later, how much different would this publication history piece be if someone was researching a shorter work, something likely to be anthologized? And I found that WorldCat is also useful for finding that information, or information about those kinds of texts. I did find, in experimenting with it, that it was better if you're looking for a shorter work that might be in anthologies, rather than searching for author phrase, title phrase, to just go with author and title. And we'll go ahead and stick with this theme of children's literature featuring mythical named swords. And look for The Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. And it does a good job of turning up some items where this poem has been included. It's also useful to know, take this one as an example, that WorldCat within a record for a book will highlight your search terms. So we see Lewis Carroll appearing here and there, and there's Jabberwocky. And you can also do a Control F to find it on the page. That might save you some time and let you skip to where it appears. All right. And again, we could request this. It's an important bit. Worth mentioning again, through the request via interlibrary loan link is where we would request something. But this one again is here at Ball State, so we would be in luck. The other research for this publication history piece that I mentioned was a database called Books in Print. So back on the A to Z databases list, I'm going to go to the B's and find it here. It's also, you'll hear it referred to as Bowker's Books in Print. That's the name of the company that produces it. It's a database about books. I find it to be more oriented toward the retail and publishing world than it is than a library catalog would be. But I and other librarians do find it useful. It purports to include books published from 1980 to the present, although we'll see with our example that maybe they're selling themselves a little bit short. We have a basic search box up here, but I always prefer advanced search myself. And let's go back to good old Mr. Alexander. And here I'm going to choose author contributor to say I want to find things by or partially by him. And I'm going to take keyword and title for book of 3. So I'm looking for book of 3 is words in the title of items. I find that the keyword and title for this kind of discovering editions work is preferable to exact title, which was another option they give you, because the exact title option, it leaves out things that might be, you know, the book of 3, an anniversary edition or something like that. But again, as is common in our resources, we have options. We have a relevancy ranking by default, but we could change it to perhaps date descending to get the newest items first, or date ascending to get the oldest first. And there are some interesting filters in books in print. For instance, we could filter according to a market, place the book might be sold, formats, its status, being in print or out of print, and so on. See, I was interested maybe in, I have an audio cassette listed here. That takes me back. So I can see the 2 audio cassette editions of the book of 3 listed here. And in terms of giving you information about the item, there is some of the same kinds of content or information that we would see in a library catalog. For instance, the title, the author, in the case of an audiobook, the reader, a publication year. But books in print will add in some things about the author, an excerpt here and there. There it goes. So book reviews and things like that. Sometimes reader reviews are available too. And again, similar options for keeping what you found is that we have an option to email things to ourselves, to print things too. In various contexts, researchers will sometimes ask a librarian, how can I be sure that I have found everything? And the truth is you can't be certain, but I would not conclude from searching just these 2 resources that you'd identified every edition of a given text. But if you started with these, if you search these, then you're off to a good start, a good thorough start, I would say. A person could continue by searching other large library catalogs, but if those are catalogs of libraries that are included in WorldCat, which in the United States and Canada, there would be a strong likelihood, it might be a little bit redundant. But a person could continue with the National Union catalog of pre-1956 imprints. Depending upon the time during which their literary text was published, that might be of interest. It comprises several hundred volumes, and we have it up on the 4th floor here at Bracken. Then there was also the National Union catalog. This is the post-1956 piece, and compiles holdings of libraries that were included into the NUC, and it's been published serially over the years. We have the 1956 through 67 and 68 through 72 sets here at Bracken. Let's talk some about how texts were received in their time. This is the portion of the workshop where I always most keenly feel the constraints of having limited time. There are so many places to look. But to answer this question, a researcher needs to find reviews of the book that were published when it was new. And there are many, many resources that a person could consult, depending on when their text was published, the nationality of the author, whether the book was more a work of popular fiction or something more literary, etc. But in the interest of time, I'm going to demonstrate these three. Again, they are available on our A to Z databases list. So I'm going to jump back there. The first is New York Times ProQuest Historical Newspapers. There it is. So this database contains the full text of the New York Times from its inception in 1851 until 3 years ago. It's only one newspaper, but as many of you probably realize, it was America's paper of record for much of that time. And again, it's often useful here to do your searches using the title of the text you're interested in and the author's last name to enter them separately. And there's a helpful filter down here too, the document type filter, which does have a review option. So before we begin, we can filter and tell the database that we are just looking for reviews. This time we'll move out of the domain of children's lit and look for Slaughterhouse-5, reviews of Slaughterhouse-5. In a search like this, you might be interested in filtering for the publication date. You can do this before or after you search. But if you choose to do it afterward, this has an interesting way of representing its publication date filter. It's a bar graph with each decade as a bar, kind of showing you where mentions of the book or your search terms spiked or declined in the New York Times. There is also a publication date sorting option, so I can go to oldest first and bring the oldest or the first mentions of the book in the NYT to the top. So we'll take a look at this one. Books of the Times, at last Kurt Vonnegut's famous Dresden book. We can click the title, and its default view is this one that represents the article, or in this case, a review, kind of as a newspaper clipping. And it's in this view if you are looking at something where there was a jump in the middle of the article. In other words, one of those references where it says continued or see Vonnegut on B4 or something like that. That they would both be here. But there's also a page view option you see over here on the left, which can be kind of interesting if you're interested in the broader context of the book. It often will show you, or it does display the entire page that your item, your article appeared on. So you kind of get a sense of what else was potentially happening in the news on that day, or what other things were being presented to a reader of this review. And up in the upper right corner, you have your options for taking this with you when you go. You could download PDFs of the articles. You could copy the link, or you could go into the 3-dot menu where you would find the very common, again, email option appears in most library databases. The other two I wanted to show you are Reader's Guide Retrospective and Reader's Guide Full Text Select. They appear together on the list of the R's. And if I'm going to go ahead and click Reader's Guide Retrospective, these two resources are electronic analogs to the famous printed resource, the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature. which I used long ago for my science fair projects and other elementary school related things. The retrospective flavor of it covers 1890 to 1982, and full text select goes from 1982 to the present. So these are resources that will help you discover articles on a topic or about a book or book reviews that were published in a range of periodicals from 1890 to the present. And it is in fact possible to search them at the same time. So I click the retrospective, but I can go up here to this link that says choose databases. This is a list of databases that we have access to through a company called EBSCO. And I already have retrospective checked. I can also check now Reader's Guide Full Text Select and hit OK. And now I am searching the pair of them at the same time. So let's take an example here. Let's go with Grapes of Wrath. We'll put Steinbeck there in the second box and hit search. So another thing I found in preparing my workshop here is another skill that a researcher has to employ, or something they have to check for, is looking out for reviews of film adaptations of the book that they might be looking for. As was the case with the Grapes of Wrath film, I think came out fairly quickly after the publication of the book. But I've chosen this one, I want to do some filtering here. So we have a publication date filter. Again, it's a common feature of our databases. Let's say I want maybe 4 or 5 years worth of reviews. So I'm going to change that from 1939 to 2022 to 1939 to 1944. Shorten this up a little bit. So I chose the Grapes of Wrath for this example because it illustrates something interesting about researching the reception of a text upon its publication. As I alluded to earlier, sometimes in addition to reviews, you will find articles about attempts to censor or suppress the text. So there is one down here, this one, number 10, Grapes of Wrath Consigned to Flames by Library Board of East St. Louis, Illinois. So I can click on these titles to get a little bit more information about an article. If there was an abstract for this one, it would appear here. So how researching or using these resources, these two works, is often for the more recent content, we might have it available electronically and we can link to it. But for older content, if you remember using the Reader's Guide back in the day, that this is something that kind of allows you to find out when, in this case, a review of a book was published and where. So our next step would be to find out, do we have access to Publishers Weekly, and more specifically, the November 25th, 1939 issue of it. So you can always begin when the full text of something is not available. If an item isn't available in the database you're using, you will find this button, Find It at Ball State. You can always start by clicking that. And often, if we have the PDF of the article, it's going to pipe us through directly, or there would be an area up here which would say View Online and name a database, and we would click that link. In this case, we have mention of our bound periodicals collection, so saying that we have some physical access to Publishers Weekly, but again, here it's showing us that we have issues from 1996 to 2019. So that doesn't cover this issue from 1939. So we kind of get to, I don't like to say worst case scenario, but the not as greatest, but not terribly bad at all scenario where we don't have an item, an article, or a review you're looking for, but we would get it to the researcher pretty quickly through a free service called Interlibrary Loan. We mentioned this earlier in WorldCat, where we were looking at books which would be delivered physically to borrowers, often with something like an article or a review or even a chapter of a book. We can have it delivered electronically as a PDF. And again, by clicking Request the Item via Interlibrary Loan, we're going to enter our interlibrary loan system, again, which you will also hear referred to as Iliad, where we would create our request. and submit the form. And with an electronic item, you know, I always tell students be prepared for this to take a week, but it's often maybe a few business days. All right. So concluding to wrap up this second question. As I mentioned, there are many resources a person could use to look for information about the contemporary reception of a new text or a text when it was new, be they reviews or articles about you know, news related to the book. Among those other ones that are available electronically, we have American Antiquarian Society Historical Periodicals Collection, Literature Criticism Online, and JSTOR. American Antiquarian Society Periodicals Collection. It contains magazine, journal, and other periodical content published in colonial America and the United States from 1684 to 1912. Literature Criticism Online. It's actually an amalgam of 5 long-standing resources, and they combine scholarly analyses of a text with book reviews, biographical information about the author, and these kind of encyclopedia-like primers about texts and authors. And JSTOR is a multidisciplinary database of mostly scholarly content, but it specializes in back issue periodical content. It's a place to find reviews of older texts for certain. But all of these I've mentioned, they kind of presume that the researcher is looking for a book that was published some time ago. So a person looking for reviews of a relatively recent book or play or what have you would probably be well served to look in the various databases that specialize in current news content, such as Academic Search Complete, Newspaper Source Plus, McClatchy Tribune Collection, Access World News, and Nexus Uni. And there are even others. You know, if you, like myself, can recall using printed indices to do your research at some point in the past, those resources that didn't have the full text, but let you discover when and where an article on your topic, in this case, a book review, was published, which you could then locate by finding out how to access that publication. You know, we have many. We have a Book Review Digest, Book Review Index, the official index to the Times in its various iterations, the official index to the Times, index to the Times, and the Times index, indexing the Times of London from 1923 to 2013 would be additional places to look. All right, we'll turn now to thinking about where would we find some scholarly analyses and interpretations of the text, and particularly fairly recent ones. This is really one of the most common questions I receive from students studying literature. They need to find analyses and interpretations of a particular text or a group of texts, maybe books by a certain author or books that share a particular motif. And they need to find fairly recent scholarly journal content. There are several databases that enable them to do that. They often will begin with MLA International Bibliography and maybe move on to JSTOR before some others. Once again, our A to Z databases list is kind of the MVP here. It's going to provide us access to all of these. So I'm going to go to the M's for MLA International Bibliography. MLA, it's usually the first stop for current scholarly analyses of literary texts. It's focused on the study of languages and literatures, but it does contain some film and television criticism too, if you ever need to look for that. And again, a person just looking for analyses of a particular text can search for it using its title and the author's name. If their research were more specific, if they were interested in a particular character within that text, or the setting of it, a particular theme or plot development, social conditions that are represented in the text, they would probably need to do some brainstorming ahead of time to generate search terms to represent those things. But as I said, if we're just interested in some interpretations of a particular book of interest, title and author are the way to begin. Pardon me. And like most scholarly article databases, MLA is going to provide descriptive information about articles, including abstracts, subject terms, which are kind of like tags, tag-like phrases that represent the primary topics of an article. And those things are tremendous help to a student in identifying relevant articles from a list of search results. So this is one where we have a link to linked full text, meaning that we have the full text of this somewhere, so we can just click that. It's patched us through. So I need to go and download the PDF up there. And it's always important, you know, when we look at these things, to say, how will I keep track of what I found? This database, again, offers us some of the common options. We could print this page of information. We could email a reminder to ourselves about this. We have a permalink option if we want a durable permanent link to come back to this page. And this database, like many others, has a temporary folder where we can add things to a folder. And then, you know, we looked at this momentarily in WorldCat, and then you'll eventually have a list of things here, which you can select and email the list to yourself, export it to a citation management package or something like that. We'll take a quick peek at JSTOR, which I listed as an additional resource for book reviews a moment ago. As I mentioned, it's a multidisciplinary database, and it specializes in providing back issue access to scholarly journals. It's a large database with a lot of full text. There is a trade-off, though. Embargoes are common in JSTOR. An embargo is a practice in which the recent content for a given journal or group of journals is withheld for some period of time. In JSTOR, it's kind of common for them to be 1 to 3 years in length. So that for any particular journal, we might have it dating back in JSTOR decades, but the most recent 12 months of issues or the most recent 3 years of issues are not available yet. And as time goes by, they kind of, that 1 to 3 year window moves along, and things become available in that way. And I often always tell students, you know, well, with these databases, the search interfaces are very common. I try to build their confidence and point out at some point that most of these article databases, they kind of mix and remix this same search page of having multiple places to type your terms and some optional filters accompanying them. Here in JSTOR, because it does contain so much, I often do my filtering before I begin looking. So I'm going to filter for articles because I want scholarly content about texts. If we wanted reviews, I would check that box instead. And this is a list of all of the disciplines that are represented in JSTOR. And maybe here I'm going to choose down, language and literature. And you'll see here it says 454 titles. So what you're doing essentially by checking a box here is limiting your search to journals that have been categorized as falling into the discipline you're choosing. If you're curious what they are, you can hit this little caret menu and it will show you the list there. It covers a lot of name changes throughout the years too. So I've chosen language and literature and articles. And then once again, I'll use a title and that text's author and run my search. So unlike some of the databases, see, I'm just looking for something interesting to click here. Decentering the self and Bram Stoker's Dracula. Okay, I'm interested. Content in JSTOR tends to not be accompanied by an abstract. So it's something, it's a caveat, something to know about as you begin searching, that this will be a little bit of additional work, additional skimming perhaps, as you're using JSTOR to determine what items are relevant to your search and what are things that you just want to kind of pass over. And again, we have our options such as downloading a PDF. Within share, we have our email option if we want to email ourselves something. JSTOR does this a little bit differently, that it looks for like the email program installed on your computer. Most of these databases, they'll pop open a window and you just type an email address. And there's a durable link over here. We want to come back to this at some later date. There are other places a researcher could consult. Project Muse is an additional database where you can find scholarly analyses of a text. It contains a fair number of electronic books too, and content from literary magazines too. But analyses and interpretations are not the sole domain of journals and periodicals. They often appear in books. Those could be monographs or edited collections. So for books in our collection, most people will choose to use OneSearch. That's the place to begin. It's a multidisciplinary and multi-format mix of as much of the library's content as we can make available in this one single text box that's available on our homepage. And we could go back to WorldCat too, if we wanted to potentially find analyses and interpretations in book format that aren't available here and have them requested, have them delivered to us. All right, so the final question for this workshop is, where can one find particularly impactful analyses and interpretations of a text? So for this, we're going to look at a database called Web of Science. So I'll take you there now, and pardon me while I continue to swat down the number of tabs I have open. So we'll find Web of Science here. It's multidisciplinary. It tends to index and abstract high impact journals. It does also include some monographs and essays too, collected essays, pardon me. If you have ever used Arts and Humanities Citation Index, Social Sciences Citation Index, Sciences Citation Index, this is an electronic combination of those. So we'll stay with, I'm going to add a row so that I'll have two search boxes. You're probably getting a good sense of my reading preferences here. I'm going to search now for Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So as with other databases, my list of results, I have 466, is accompanied by a number of filters, and there are some interesting ones in Web of Science that you don't see in other databases. For instance, highly cited papers, which is represented by this little trophy icon. So highly cited, it designates articles that are the top 1% by citations received compared to other papers published in the same field within the same year. And they also, that trophy icon, presuming that's in here somewhere, would appear with that article on our list of results. We'll see there's one on this list right there. Sometimes you'll also see a little flame, and in the quick filters, that is called the hot papers filter. Those are papers that were published in the most recent 2 years and began receiving citations quickly upon publication. But Web of Science also has some useful sorting options if you would like to find highly cited papers. We see our default, as is the case with many databases, is relevance. And I can go to citations highest first to bring the most commonly cited items to the top of my list. And when you look at the top of these results, as I did in preparing this, you might be reminded that Frankenstein's monster is an often used metaphor for things that are amalgams of other things or that have developed out of control. So if you want to weed out these things where they are artfully using Frankenstein and writing about particle swarms in this case, or things like that, or the development of cities, there are a few other useful filters over here. We have one called Web of Science Categories, which gets at the idea of choosing, maybe let's not say a discipline, but a topic like literature or poetry. There's also Web of Science Index. I mentioned those existing indexes, Arts and Humanities Citation Index and others that predate Web of Science, and its electronic format that you could choose. Arts and Humanities Citation Index in this case would be the one I would go with, and would weed out some of the things relevant to the social sciences, and so on. And there's also a research areas filter. There it is. It kind of does the same kind of thing as that categories filter too. So I'll go with the index filter. I'm going to exclude everything that does not appear in Arts and Humanities citation index by checking that box. And you'll also notice on the list of results, there are numbers that are accompanying the various items on our results list. There is a citations number and a references number. So let's take this one as an example of power maniacs and unethical geniuses, 70 citations and 10 references. So what the citations number is telling us is that there are 70 other articles in Web of Science that cite this one. And you can see them by clicking there. And you'll now see that it's giving us 52 that are cited. So Web of Science is it's kind of a package, and probably what's happening there, the disparity is that there are 18 articles appearing in some subset of Web of Science that for whatever reason we do not subscribe to. These again are sorted by newest first, but we can change that. We could go to citations highest first again, if we like. Pardon me. And a researcher again could experiment with different ways of ranking the results, of filtering them over here on the left, and sorting them just as we did a moment ago. Let's go back to that newest first. That's kind of an interesting thing. One of the usefulnesses of this database is that it kind of lets us to do this work that I often call citation chaining, where we start out with one article and then we find more recent articles that cited that one. And it's kind of, it works on the logic that if a subsequent article cited one that was published earlier that we know of, maybe they're about the same topics. This is kind of helpful for students who have found some article on their topic, but they feel like it's too old for them to cite. Like they like that it's on topic, but they want to find something more recent. Maybe I'm interested in this one, from Evil Demiurged Caring Hero. As with other databases, we can get information about the article here. We see its abstract, the information about the author, where it was published, and so on. And we see this one has no citations yet. And we have like these similar options for marking things. We can add things to a marked list here in Web of Science, or I can see my marked list there. We can export things. There's my marked list button to EndNote, RefWorks, etc. And we can email them to. The other number a moment ago where we were looking at that list and we had, oh gosh, was it 300 some, 10 references. These are articles in Web of Science that were cited by that one we were looking at a moment ago. So Web of Science is very helpful for that citation chaining work and also for its various options. It will let you identify articles that have been cited frequently on your topic, and the presumption there being that if they're being cited a lot, maybe those are key articles in understanding the topic. So the other resource mentioned on the slide, I want to save you some time for questions, but we do have this really excellent resource called Oxford Bibliographies Online. It's a database, as the name implies, of bibliographies on many subjects, including literature. And they are listed, or Oxford Bibliographies Online is listed on the A to Z list. And they're really great because they are curated by experts and researchers, people who really specialize in the thing that they are writing their bib about. But you could also find bibliographies in book format too, is another way to look for them. So a critically important piece of information I always include in my workshops and my library instruction sessions is my contact information, so that anyone who's attended might be doing this kind of research can contact me for help or suggestions, more particularly their topic at a later time. So I will leave that with you here. You're maybe in less peril of having upcoming assignments than the students I meet. But if you're conducting some research about a novel, a play, or a poem, short story, or some other kind of text, and you could use my help, my email address is there, also my desk phone too. And I tend to be here from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, if you'd like to reach out. But I wanted to give you some time for whatever questions you might have. You're very welcome. So there are no questions. I must have been very thorough. I'll take take this as a compliment.
Hey Joseph, no question, but nod to the all the books you looked up. My undergrad thesis was in Dracula, and yeah, big fascination with all that. Just started Poor Things as well before I go watch the movie. So thanks for all that.
It is my favorite book because there are so many interpretations of Dracula.
All right, if there are no questions, I will go ahead and start closing out the event. So thank you, Joseph, for that. Very
Thank you for
informative
inviting.
stuff. Yeah. And I just wanted to let everyone know that if you want to review this workshop or share it with someone, it will be uploaded to the University Library's YouTube channel shortly after. And you could also watch like our previous events there. We have support for course material affordability and accessibility and open scholarship on campus, info about that. And a quick reminder that our next event will be on Thursday, February 15th, and it is titled Media Literacy in a Post-Truth World. So you'll be able to get some information on how to evaluate information accurately and check for authority and bias. So yeah, you can register for that event now. And yeah, again, thank you for attending and have a great rest of your day.